Today we're doing something absolutely crucial. We are diving straight into the official court dockets to separate hard facts from a pretty complex legal fiction that was presented during a December 30th, 2025 live stream by Tommy Boy Studios. Look, when narratives get super complicated and emotions are running high, the absolute best thing we can do is just strip away all the rhetoric and go straight to the primary sources. We're going to look strictly at the paperwork. So if you want to know what actually happened in the real-world court system versus what was confidently broadcasted over the internet, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get into it. Okay, so the entire foundation of the broadcast argument rests on this specific claim. The idea that Robert Cole Graham faced a grand jury of his peers who all unanimously agreed to charges. And the streamer presented this to their audience as an absolute, verifiable fact. They painted this really vivid picture, right? A group of everyday, normal citizens sitting around a table, reviewing all the evidence against Graham, and coming to a unanimous agreement that he was guilty, or at the very least, deserved to face a trial. I mean, it sounds incredibly definitive. It adds this massive layer of perceived legitimacy to their whole narrative. But as we pull back the curtain and actually look at the court records, we're going to see that this confidently stated process, it doesn't align with the docket at all. To really understand the fundamental legal hallucination going on here, we first need to get on the same page about what a grand jury actually is in our justice system. You know, there's that old legal joke that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor asked it to. And the reason people say that is because the entire thing happens completely behind closed doors. It is an exclusively prosecution-only process. The defense attorney, not in the room. The defendant, not in the room presenting their side of the story. There isn't even a judge there acting as a neutral referee. And absolutely no defense counterpoints or cross-examinations are allowed. Its sole purpose is just for the prosecution to present their best possible, totally unopposed evidence to get an indictment. It's not a trial. Understanding that reality is absolutely key to figuring out why the livestream's narrative completely falls apart the second you apply factual scrutiny to it. Graham was never actually presented to a grand jury. Not at all. Instead, he went through a completely different process in California called a preliminary hearing. And I mean, the difference between these two things is literally night and day. While a grand jury is that closed, prosecution-only secret room, a California preliminary hearing is an adversarial process. That means it happens right out in open court before a single judge, not a jury of peers. And most importantly, it involves live testimony that the defense can actually test and challenge right then and there. So the live stream basically swapped out one highly distinct legal process for another, describing a secret, closed-door jury deliberation that, quite literally, never happened in this case. What we're actually looking at here are two completely divergent legal paths. What the broadcaster essentially did was take the exact legal procedure that applied to one man over in Texas and copy-pasted it onto another man out in California. So on one hand, you have Daniel Doud. He actually did face a formal grand jury in Texas for aggravated sexual assault of a child, which resulted in a true bill indictment. But on the other hand, you have the actual reality of Robert Cole Graham's case, which proceeded entirely through preliminary hearings based on a criminal complaint in California. By blurring those two entirely separate jurisdictions and completely different procedures, the stream created this unified theory of guilt that, well, it just simply doesn't exist on paper. The charging body wasn't a group of normal people, it was a standard criminal complaint. The evidentiary review wasn't a unanimous jury agreeing on anything, it was actually a series of 5 preliminary settings in Department AO2 before a judge. And the final outcomes, oh man, this is where the narrative really jumps the tracks. The stream heavily implied that these guys were procedural equivalents, treating Graham's situation as just as bad or worse. But the verbatim court records showed Doud formally pleaded guilty and went to jail, while Graham's case ended in a complete, total dismissal. It is a massive mismatch of facts. As we systematically dismantle these core myths, we uncover some really fascinating procedural quirks. For instance, the streamer tried to argue that a grand jury acts as this magical shield or filter that would easily catch a lie. But as we just established, defense attorneys aren't even allowed in grand juries to point those lies out. But actually, the most fascinating detail here is about California's Prop 115. See, the stream claimed the only reason Graham walked free was simply because a witness didn't show up. But under California law, specifically Prop 115, a responding police officer can totally, legally testify to what a victim told them at the preliminary stage. It's hearsay, but it's allowed there. The prosecution literally did not need her physically in the room to proceed. Yet, knowing they had this powerful tool right at their disposal, the state still chose to completely dismiss Graham's case. They didn't drop it because of a missing person. They dropped it because they didn't have a case to prosecute. And this brings us to the real danger of false equivalence. When you conflate a legal indictment with a conviction, and you try to brand Graham's total exoneration as somehow weird or suspicious or worse, you are creating a detailed myth literally out of thin air. When someone speaks super confidently about the paperwork, but doesn't have the basic legal literacy to correctly read what that paperwork actually means, the reality of the procedure gets lost entirely. The lines between a legally binding plea of guilt and a total dismissal by the court just get completely blurred. And suddenly, peer-reviewed deliberations that never even happened become verified facts to thousands of viewers. Forcing two radically distinct legal outcomes into one predetermined negative box completely misrepresents how the justice system actually handled these specific cases. The disparity in the final outcomes here is absolutely staggering. Daniel Doud waived his jury trial and pleaded guilty to indecent exposure. He received 180 days in jail. That is the hard, cold reality of Daniel Doud's case, a convicted offender serving time behind bars based on a signed guilty plea. Now, on the completely opposite end of the justice system spectrum, you have Robert Cole Graham. His count 01 was completely dismissed on January 24, 2006. 0 days. A total dismissal. Legally speaking, Graham remains an innocent man. Trying to equate those two outcomes, or somehow manipulating the narrative to make a full legal exoneration seem sinister based on a process that never happened, it completely defies the documented reality of the court system. We all know it is incredibly easy to get swept up in a highly confident, highly entertaining broadcast. It happens. But the truth in our justice system actually matters. The actual procedures matter. So when a compelling narrative completely conflicts with the official, boring court records, what is the true cost of accepting a legal fiction over verified fact? It's something to think about.